What up, what up? I'm the Crate Digger. This is Studio to Stage. Studio to Stage is a development series which is designed to increase awareness of artists to standards, norms, and just different things to help increase the likelihood of success, efficiency, and quality. Now, this series has two sections, and each of those sections is divided up into three subsections. We have pre studio, in studio, post studio, then we have pre stage or pre show, on stage, and off stage or post stage. With that being said, all of the things that I share are based on decades of my time on stage and in the studio as a performer, DJ, producer, and much, much more. Listen, this is not all inclusive, nor are my suggestions the only way that things can be done. With that being said, I've seen a lot of ways that it shouldn't be done. Feel free to like, comment, and share. Let's get into it. Now we have our studio selected. It's time to talk about what to do in studio. First, let's talk about personnel. Who needs to be in the studio with us? As mentioned before, you have probably, hopefully, figured out what studio personnel that work for the studio will be there, whether it's an engineer, techs, etc. Who do I need to have, or who do I need to invite or allow to come with me to the studio? Who are part of the quality control process. These are the people who can really tell us this sounds good, this doesn't sound good, let's try it again this way, and or this is what the label needs, or whoever inside of your process is there to help make sure that you're getting the best content, the best takes, the best recordings to move through the rest of the process with. Sometimes that's the producer of the track who is there to help engage and influence and give their input on how the track is being played and or mixed potentially, along with developing how different creative runs, lyrics, arrangements, all these different things that happen. Sometimes the producer is part of that process. Sometimes, if you're part of a label, your executive producer may want to be there as well, even if they don't stay the whole time. Sometimes, if a label is paying for your studio time, a manager, executive producer, or somebody outside of your direct camp may want to be aware and present for parts of, if not the whole studio session. Once again, you may have a rep, whether it be a manager, whether it be somebody who's kind of just there to not so much watch your back, but once again, if you have a rep or someone who's kind of there on as an agent or a representative of you, the artist themselves, you may want to contact them and have them present. And then we have to talk about it. Your crew, your entourage, homegirls, homeboys, the posse, whatever term you want to use, determine who really needs to be there. Remember, first thing, this is a business. A studio is a place of business. Number two, you're paying for your time spent at this business. And three, you have a product or a project or some content you're trying to create. Anybody who does not add to that equation, you need to consider not having them in the studio with you. Let's talk about process. A lot of different studios and a lot of different artists have different processes. Now, there are some places that don't have the capacity that other places have. So a smaller studio may not have the capacity or the capability to house a large singing group singing together. Or even if you have a smaller group, say a 4-person performance group, they may not have the capacity or capability to record all your vocals simultaneously. Ideally, this is something you've thought about in your pre-studio workings, but keep in mind, every studio is not built the same. So understand what the capacity and capability of that studio is once you get there. This also applies to hardware. If you're in a studio, for example, a home studio or a smaller studio that's running a certain type of computer, that computer may not have the same speed as a computer in a different, larger, or a higher end studio. That doesn't mean they can't do the same things, but they may not have the capacity to do them at the same speeds. Once again, there's a whole lot of things that can fit under this category. I just suggest you understand what the capability and capacity of the studio you've chosen are so you can best work around or work through the process in the most efficient way possible. Let's talk decorum. A lot of studios, once again, are built different ways. Some studios have excellent sound reinforcement, so conversations outside of the studio space do not bleed in. Some are less when it comes to their sound reinforcement, so noise from outside and or conversations outside of that studio space or recording space may get picked up if they're too loud. Along with, if you are recording in a space and ambulances go by, or there's people on the phone outside of the recording booth, but that could bleed in. Or it could also distract the engineer who's doing their job to listen to and listen for different things. So many different examples, but when it comes to decorum, understand that a studio is a place for recording, and our recordings happen best 9 times out of 10 with the least amount of noise and conversation. We've got to talk about food, drink, smokes, whether that be nicotine, to weed, vape, whatever it is, incense. Remember, food, drinks, and smoke, all of those things can do damage to equipment. Smoke, you might say, like, what, huh? Yes. Even smoke in fog machines, smoke, all of that residue in the air at some point settles, and it can settle in and on equipment. It can cause damage to studio equipment, can cause damage to musical equipment. Aside from, a smoky room is not always the best space for a vocalist to prepare and or perform. So once again, keep in mind as well, the perfumes and the smell goods and the different things, sometimes that can cause allergy and or sinus reactions to different folks. So once again, be aware of your decorum in the studio space. It is a business, and it is a place of business where you're paying your money to work towards a product. The last thing, expectations and exceptions. I've been in places where the expectation were met, but they did some things that were exceptional beyond the expectations laid out in the contract that I had with the studio. It is not fair, and it's not always, I'm trying to use the best word, so I'll just leave it there. It's not fair to expect exceptions. Now, if you have developed a relationship or get someone to agree to an exception, that's per your agreement. But be sure in your pre-studio work through, you've laid out what the expectations are, whether it be time frames of turnaround, whether that be food, whether that be capacity of the hardware or software, or whatever example. Be sure those expectations are clear, both what you expect of the studio and what the studio may expect of you. And if you have to work towards or through an exception, remember that is an exception.